Hi, everyone, and welcome to this week's lesson on the timeline of life. Last week, we learned about the Carboniferous period and the giant forests and insects that evolved on the land. And today, we are going to be learning about the next period in the timeline of life, the Permian period. Right here, you can notice right away that the Permian period is shorter than the Carboniferous period. The Permian period is the sixth period and the last period of the Paleozoic era. It lasted 47 million years from about 299 million years ago to 252 million years ago. It ended with the greatest mass extinction that the Earth has ever known. This was known as the Great Dying, and it wiped out 90 to 95% of all the plants and animals that were alive at the time. So we've been talking throughout the last couple of periods about Pangea and how it was beginning to form because there were continents, the continents of Gondwana and Euramerica were getting closer and closer together. And in the Permian period, the supercontinent of Pangea takes its final form. It's so big, it stretches across the Earth from nearly from the South Pole to the North Pole. And there's still a lot of large swampy forests on Pangea. But there are also huge deserts in the middle of the continent because they're too far away from the ocean. The insects and the tetrapod life, and if you remember, tetrapods are the animals that have four legs on the earth. They continue to diversify and expand on the land. And the first modern trees are seen in the Permian. Coniferous trees like evergreen trees that we have a lot right around here. You can probably look out your window and see a coniferous tree somewhere around, an evergreen. There are also ginkgos and a couple of other kinds of trees that we still see today that have survived from the Permian period. But I want to talk mostly today about the end of the Permian period. In a relatively short period of time at the end of the Permian period, scientists believe that there was a massive amount of volcanic activity, and we can see that here in our timeline. Volcanoes were very, very active at the end of the Permian period, and the gases from the volcanoes released a lot of carbon dioxide into the air. And you may remember from going through our previous periods that when carbon dioxide goes into the air, the earth gets warmer. And so all of the ash and the carbon dioxide in the air from all of these volcanoes caused there to be global warming. The earth and the oceans, the air and the water, all got warmer. So it was already hot, but then it got to be really, really hot. And that also caused the amount of oxygen. When the carbon dioxide goes up, the oxygen goes down in the air and in the water. And there were some places in the water where there was almost no oxygen whatsoever. So as we know, animals need oxygen to survive. So if the oxygen was going down, there were definitely species that weren't able to adapt to the lower levels of oxygen, both on the land and in the water. And in the water especially, there were some some bacteria that were that started to grow. They grow well in areas where there isn't as much oxygen, but they produce a poisonous gas that made the water even more deadly for animals in the ocean. And also, uh, it also rose out of the water and mixed in with the air and became deadly for animals and plants that were on the land as well. So all of this is happening during the end of the Permian period. And with all of those changes, that's why we see so much life wiped out. Nearly all the life, all the plant and animal life in on Earth is wiped out at the end of the Permian period. And that is why it ended the era, is that the changes were so drastic that life had to make some very significant changes and started looking very different at the beginning of our next era, which we will study after spring break. And so today we are going to add 1, 2, 3, 4 pictures to our timeline. We have a volcano for all the volcanic activity. And here it is on our sheet of pictures. There we go. There's my volcano. And I'm going to put it right here. And let's see, we also have one of our tetrapods. We have the ancestors of the modern amphibians. One of them here is on our sheet. It's right there. I'm having to be a little bit careful putting out my pictures today. Okay, here is my amphibian, and it goes here. It is following here. We also see the first appearance of herbivorous reptiles that eat plants. And those reptiles also had eggs with a soft shell. So let's see, what else do we need? We also need, we need our insects. Remember how I said that not only the tetrapods, but the insects also diversified and expanded during the Permian period. In fact, they expanded so much that they were the largest group of animals at the time. There were more kinds of insects than there were any other kinds of animals in any other group. So we see metamorphosis in our insects, and they go right here. There we go. All right. And then our last thing here, it says trapped seeds dry up and produce great deposits of salt. As just like before, as the continents were coming closer together, with the seawater that was trapped in between, it dried up in the middle of the great big continent of Pangaea. And where they're there are my salt flats. All right. And there's a place not too far from Colorado in Utah where there is a huge area of salt deposits. It's called the Great Salt Lake, and it is really something to see. All just miles and miles and miles and miles of salt on the land. And so here's our salt, and it is going to go here, right next to our dragonflies. Okay, there we go. And that is all of our pictures to add to our timeline this week. I hope you guys enjoy the rest of the lesson, and I will see you next week for our continuing journey through the timeline. Bye-bye.